Kicking around all things Canucks here on this rink-wide round table. Jeff along with Irf and David. Guys, what do we make of the recent homestand? They kind of scuffled along. I mean, they didn't look great against Arizona and Chicago. They won both of those games. They had their work cut out for them against Columbus in the final game, but ultimately pulled that one out. The Leafs, they had the big lead. They let it get away, and then there was the one loss, one dropped point, and that was the overtime loss to the St. Louis Blues, a game that had a little controversy in it as well. So 9 out of 10 points on a 5-game homestand that takes them into this All-Star break. Again, not at their best. Was this simply the dog days? Are there any red flags for either one of you in the way this team is playing? We always hear about the process. Or should we be standing up and applauding this group that even when not at their best, they still took 9 of 10 points?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, Jeff. It's 9 out of the possible 10 points. I mean, look, you're going to get into a situation where you might not be playing at your best. And I think Rick Tocchet did say that he didn't like some players' games, obviously, and he didn't like his team game. And no matter what, they still were able to find a way to win. And I think that that's the biggest thing for this team that they've had a lot of trouble doing over the recent years, is finding ways to win games. Even if you're out of it, even if the games are mucky and they're gross, ugly winning is still winning hockey games. You're still getting 2 points on the board. And, we say points are a premium in the NHL, and the Canucks have a lot of them, but taking out a 9 out of 10 when you're not playing well, Jeff, I think they'll take that every day.
Dave, how do you look at the homestand?
You'll see later when I pick my favorite game of the season.
Okay.
But
it narrows the field.
It does narrow it a little bit. But I think everything Irv said is absolute fact. You just look at what the games that they almost lost. The one with Columbus is a big one. They stormed back and put the pedal to the metal. And again, you're a little bit concerned about the second period, but I attribute that largely to dog days. Like you just said, there's going to be ups and downs in a season. And I think you'd rather have your downs mean that you're going to get 9 out of 10 points on a homestand and not look spectacular doing it every single night, but you still got it done. And I think that's what matters the most for this team.
I think what encouraged me the most about the homestand was the return of the electric power play. Mm-hmm. When they needed power play goals, they were able to summon the offense necessary. That's how they stormed out of the gates, right? Like the top end guys were doing it at 5-on-5, but also had some big nights on the power play. And then really for December and much of January, power play had kind of gone quiet, but they were winning games 5-on-5. And then on the homestand, when the power play won them the game against the Leafs, right? Like had the lead, let it get away. And then in the third period, chips are down. Couple power play goals. Same thing the other night against the Blue Jackets. They went 7 for 18 in these 5 games. I mean, that's up almost at 40% in a 5-game span. You're not going to stay at 40 over the bulk of the season, but just the fact that this power play getting its groove back, I think, to me, that's, again, there were some spots during the homestand that they weren't great. But the power play can cover a lot of those. And if this thing gets humming again over the final 33 games and tunes up for the playoffs, this power play can win them a bunch more games.
Well, that's the thing. I was talking to someone that doesn't play on the team that did formerly and said that they've got great goaltending and an elite power play. And those are two things that'll get you, to go a long way in the playoffs. And, obviously the whistles kind of go away a little bit, but the Canucks are pretty good at drawing penalties too. And I think that that's a big thing. That means you're always moving your feet in both ends of the ice. You're getting into areas where guys are making it difficult for other teams to play against with the hooking calls and tripping and things like that. But yeah, the power play is great. I mean, the way that they move the puck is pretty special to watch. I mean, it's the zipping of the passes. It's getting into open space. It's, Brock Besser not just standing in one spot and being complacent. It's moving into those open areas. So the power play's been good, and it's. You look at it and say, you don't know if it can get any better, but it definitely can.
Well, and it's funny, the Columbus game the other day where they scored the 3 in the third period, I'm sure the Blue Jackets, Dave, had done their pre-scout, and I mean, they probably should have learned their lesson and stayed out of the penalty box, but they couldn't help themselves. But I think you see like the return of the seam pass there, and look, we've seen enough seam passes kill the Canucks over the last couple of seasons, so they basically are turning the tables on opponents. But so much of that comes from teams want to shade out high to try to take Quinn Hughes away. Yep. And there's just no way to defend Quinn Hughes. But if you want to allocate some of your resources and plant a guy up high, that's going to leave open ice. And that's where, JT Miller may be underrated in his passing skills. But they killed Columbus on that cross-seam pass.
Yeah, and Brock Besser touched on that post-game of that Columbus game, and he said that's the play that we used to feed to Bo, and we're starting to get it back. And I think, when we talk about the dog days and we talk about where we are in the season, you're looking for those kind of takeaways, right? Where you can see like, okay, the power play's clicking right now and they're finding different ways to succeed. And look, in the playoffs, there's going to be pre-scouts. There's going to be a lot of penalty killers kind of taking away your favorite plays. So you're going to have to find new ways to score. And I think that's the takeaway right now is that they're getting that play back where they're getting right back into the bumper and they're finding that cross-seam pass. It hasn't been there for much of this season, but they're getting back to it now and they're finding different ways to score. And that's what matters.
Well, hopefully the break doesn't stunt any momentum here because it's been a long time coming to get this power play back to the levels it's been at heading into the All-Star break. So we'll see what happens again when they reconvene in Carolina and then Boston, Detroit, Washington, and Chicago to round out the 5-game road trip. They start with 8 of 10 on the road out of this All-Star break. So that's going to be a tough stretch for them. But the flip side there is so much home cooking, including that 9-game homestand. They're basically at home for the month of March. So much good going for this Vancouver team. We've talked about it individually, collectively, special teams. Penalty kill has come alive as well. There was a huge kill, the 5-minute major against the Blue Jackets in the third period. So they should be feeling good about a lot. But it's the Canucks. It's a Vancouver market that is highly scrutinized, and there are always issues. And that leads us to the 2 Russian wingers in particular. I mean, the Andrei Kuzmenko story has been ongoing since the middle of November. Mikheyev has joined him, unfortunately, and just nothing happening for him. 17 games without a goal as he hits the All-Star break. So where does this storyline ultimately lead for the Vancouver Canucks with 5 weeks to go before the trade deadline?
Well, I think the bigger picture, if you look at it, Jeff, is one or both of them going to be a Canuck past the trade deadline. I think that's the biggest thing, right? I mean, there's been so much talk surrounding Andrei Kuzmenko, and, he's a guy that scored 39 goals in this National Hockey League. Jim Rutherford said that he can play, and he also said he can score in the NHL, whether it's here or somewhere else. So it's not just me and us in the media that are saying it, right? Their own president is saying that. So I think that, that's a situation that we're going to have to monitor, but we've talked about it so much. I mean, he's getting 4th line ice time, and then he gets elevated to the top unit power play, and you still don't do anything. And I think that's the toughest part. The Mikheyev thing to me is they still haven't gotten the player that the Toronto Maple Leafs had. And, his agent even said that, Ilya Mikheyev hasn't become Ilya Mikheyev of old yet. I understand the knee surgery. I understand things like that. But if you're asking Elias Pettersson to carry 2 guys that basically, for lack of better words, are dead weight right now, it's definitely getting tough on number 40 there.
Dave, how concerned are you about one or both of the 2 wingers we're talking about here?
So this was a topic that we've dove into quite a bit lately. And similar to what Irf just said, you've got dead weight. And in other seasons with this team, you'd be okay with that dead weight. You'd have time to wait for Kuzmenko and Mikheyev to figure it out. And Mikheyev, he signed long-term, I get it. Maybe you have a little bit more time. I think the clock's run out on Andrei Kuzmenko. You can't afford to wait any longer. If you wait longer, and I mean, look, the trade deadline's coming up, so I'm not trying to be too reactive here, but this team doesn't have time to wait for guys to get it. You're either on board and playing in a manner that's going to help this team win games in the playoffs, or you're not. And look, if the playoffs started tomorrow, Andrei Kuzmenko's either not getting much ice time or he's not in the lineup at all. So I think when you look at it that way, yeah, something's got to give here.
Yeah, I've made that point on the nights when he has been a healthy scratch, is if Rick Tocchet won't play him in a January game in St. Louis, what's going to happen if they match up against Vegas or Edmonton in round 1? And you're right, we don't know what the roster is going to look like after the trade deadline, but again, hypotheticals here. If he sticks around, but they do add somehow, which is going to be difficult because it's got to be some dollars in and dollars out. But I mean, Rick Tocchet has options. I'm not convinced that Andrei Kuzmenko's in uniform for the opening night of the playoffs. And if he is he just sitting down there at the end of the bench? And what does that accomplish? Because it just doesn't feel like this coach and this player mesh to the point that it's going to get any better. Like I think that they've extended the leash. They've done the punishment scratches. They've scratched him for consecutive games, hoping that there was a message being sent there. And here he is. He hasn't scored a goal since the game before Christmas against San Jose. And the nights that he's been apparent and found his way onto the score sheet, Chicago, San Jose, Ottawa. Well, guess what? You're not going to be facing those teams in the playoffs. You're going to be facing good teams that lock it down. And so, I don't know how this ends well for Andrei Kuzmenko and the Vancouver Canucks.
Well, and another telling thing, Jeff, is no disrespect to P.S. Suter, he's having a great season, but he's on their top power play unit.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. And Andrei Kuzmenko scored 39 goals in the National Hockey League, and he's not even there anymore. Rick Tocchet's job is to put a lineup out there every single night to try and win a hockey game. Right now, having Andrei Kuzmenko out there night in and night out is not your best chance. There are other guys who will come in and give more of an effort and work on both ends as they have been and as what Rick Tocchet and his staff demands. So I agree with Quads with kind of your point that, it might be over for a guy like Andrei Kuzmenko. And having said that, though, it's going to be tough to move that contract. I know there's a couple teams that have been interested and definitely, would like to see how the services would work if the Canucks have to retain salary or are going to have to take another contract back. But it's looking like it's going to come to an end here in a few weeks.
Yeah, and I don't think at this point it's about winning that trade. I think the win is moving off the contract to free up space that you then use to go and bring in a player that fits this system, that can find the scoring touch, that can complement Elias Pettersson. And so it's not about trying to hose another team or hit a home run with that contract. It really is, or with that player, it's more about just moving off that contract. One contract that they're not looking to move off anytime soon, Dave, and I know you like to touch on goaltending. We can't talk about the success of this team without the goaltending, and really it is the platoon, and Casey DeSmith's acquisition has turned out to be a stroke of brilliance for the Vancouver Canucks, but, their goaltending story is Thatcher Demko. He's healthy. He got back in the lineup late last season and gave us a glimpse that, last year was the anomaly here, that when he's on his game, he's as good as anybody in the National Hockey League, and he has been terrific for the Vancouver Canucks.
He's had his ups and downs. Lately, a lot of Canucks Army commenters have been turning on Thatcher Demko. And
just win, baby.
Exactly. You just need to win the games, and also, if everybody on this team has had excuses at various points in the season, not from the players, but when we talk about Elias Pettersson going through a rough patch, or JT Miller going through a rough patch, or not scoring in a few games, extend that same generosity to the goaltender as well, because this guy is going to be the guy that leads you anywhere in the playoffs. You're going to need Thatcher Demko to be at his best during the playoffs, and he's been great this season. You're going to need him to be good in the playoffs. So if he has a bad second period against Columbus, okay, you live with that. If he has a bad period against the Maple Leafs and they still win the game, you live with that. And I don't want to hear any criticism of Thatcher Demko because I've heard way too much of it lately. He's had a great season. And like I've said before, it's going to be a two-horse race for the Vezina between him and Connor Hellebuck in Winnipeg.
Demko's been great, Irf, but he's also benefited from a team that has given him all kinds of run support.
Oh, absolutely. And it starts with his backup goalie as well, right? Casey DeSmith, the acquisition before the season, turns out might be one of their best acquisitions that they've made in quite some time. He was a guy that we talked about it on a number of rink-wide post-game shows, Jeff, where they might have to change their plans here when it was a scheduled Demko start. Can we give the ropes to Casey DeSmith because he has played so well? And I think that that's a luxury that, Thatcher Demko, Ian Clark, and Casey DeSmith in that goalie room definitely enjoy. When you look at Thatcher Demko's game, you don't need him to be at his best right now, even though he is playing well and things like that. You need him to be his absolute best when it really means something come, the end of April and May. And obviously, if they make it a little bit longer than that, the run support's been incredible. Look, they can get into that shooting match with teams. You look at the game against the New Jersey Devils, that 6-5 game, right? They can score with the best of them. And I think that that's a thing that, obviously the goalies don't want to have to pull the puck out of the net 3 or 4 times a game. You want to make some saves there. But if you're able to do that, if you have to do that, your guys have your back with being able to score 5 or 6.
Well, too many years, certainly all those Travis Green years, where if you're a goaltender and you give up 1, all of a sudden you knew that your team needed 2 to win in regulation, and 2 was a big ask on a lot of nights. And if you gave up 2, now all of a sudden the idea of the Canucks roaring back with 3, come on. But here they score 4 and 5 and 6 and 10. It's a great situation for the goaltending, and so it cuts both ways. But the Canucks certainly feel like they've got one of the best goaltending tandems, and it's going to be interesting to watch the workload. In fact, it's something I'm going to dig into at Canucks Army here over the next week is, how much is too much for Thatcher Demko with an eye towards having him as fresh and ready as possible for the playoffs, and they should feel pretty comfortable when they turn to Casey DeSmith. Again, we're going to get to prediction time here. We do this on every post-game pod. We've got a stat that stands out, so I thought for consistency's sake we would bring that to the roundtable as well. We'll get to that in a moment. But I want to tell you that Rink-Wide is a presentation of Seagram's VO Select Canadian Whiskey, artfully blended and impeccably crafted. Make it your very own. It's a product of Canada. Seagram's VO Select, proudly bottled by the old Montreal Distillery in, yes, you guessed it, Montreal, but it is available nationwide. Seagram's VO Select, currently available in BC liquor stores. So visit Seagram's VO Select on the liquor store website, or you can find it at your own liquor store in person. And again, we welcome Seagram's VO Select to Rink-wide Vancouver. With Irf and Dave, we've convened the round table. We still got a whole lot more, so stick around. More of Rink-wide coming up in a moment.